Welcome to the 3x5 news, views, and reviews. Scribble on index cards. We get in and we get out fast, so keep up. Why should you watch me? I mean, aside from my obvious vocal talents. After all, YouTube is brimming over with lengthy political conversations. That's not meant to be a criticism because I find those on my favorite channel informative, brilliant even. Personally incapable, not to mention uninterested, in speaking at length, I aim to produce succinct analyses. I think you'll find them original, surprising, outside the box, and personal. In other words, you won't hear what I have to say anywhere else. Oh, one more thing. I goof around a lot. Let's dive into the Trumpism Part 6. I don't know which is worse, that people who voted for Trump and are aware of what he's doing are okay with it, or that people who voted for Trump don't even know what he is doing. The first are dangerous because of their vindictiveness. The second because of their indifference. We are stuck between the rock and the hard place of cruelty and ignorance. The rock and the hard place of cruelty and ignorance. A narrow gorge that emits very little light. Like a dancing air puppet at a used car dealership, Trump wafts back and forth between being a bully and a weakling, nothing resembling a backbone. Almost as awful as Trump's current presidency was the interregnum, or the time between his two administrations. Remember the federal cases filed against him? Relocating classified documents from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, the Georgia election interference case, and, of course, the main attraction, election obstruction on January 6th. Remember how they wended their way through the courts? No, make that ambled. No, make that meandered. No, make that plotted. No, make that trudged. Anyway, you get the idea. The finish lines for the cases were never even in sight. Watching the sand run from the hourglass on each of them was excruciating. The outcomes, or lack thereof, were crushing, with huge implications that are shaping American history. Special shout out on the January 6th case to Merrick Garland, the man who turned the character trait deliberate into a fault. Hope you're enjoying your retirement. Republicans must be pretty sure they will never be driven from power because, by ending immigration, they will have lost one of their main issues to rally their base against Democrats in future elections. I mean, there's only so much juice in trans as an issue to power a presidential campaign. As voters, our main objective is defeating MAGA in Congress in 2026 and preventing a Cro-Maganon, I like that word, Cro-Maganon, from succeeding Trump in the White House in 2028. We all find ourselves in it together, from the far left, such as myself, to center-right never-Trumpers who are once Republicans. Thus, whether or not you agree with all or even most of a Democratic candidate's policies needs to take a back seat to just winning the war against Republicans as they are presently constituted. In fact, even a centrist in progressive clothing will do at a time when the primary objective is not instituting progressive national policies. Hopefully, there will be plenty of time for that, but simply dethroning Trump. What we need now are the best fighters with the biggest mouths. This is not a time for typical Democratic nitpicking and its own patented brand of the circular firing squad. Let's keep it simple and follow into battle whoever advances to the front lines and engages with the enemy with the most firepower. Rhetorical, not literally, that is. Regarding said rhetoric, Democratic politicians have historically been cautious as if just one statement misspoken will derail them. They need to take a cue from Republicans, to whom lying is a way of life, especially Trump. In fact, I think it is a major selling point for them because it gives their followers license to lie in their own lives. It also allows you to accept lying from those close to you. Thus, for instance, sparing you from all the marital strife that results from challenging your husband's lies about whether he is cheating. Of course, because Democrats are, or profess to be, all about the truth, that would never fly with them, to their credit, of course. As a result, Democratic candidates still do that slippery thing where they evade tough questions, such as support for Israel, and completely pivot to make a point, often unrelated to the question that they want to make. But the choice is between that and a candidate who speaks freely like a human being and whose speech is not always political correct. If that's the case, I think we Democrats would prefer the latter. Forget about making exactly the right statement all the time. 75% good, 25% clunkers is fine. It's a heck of a lot better than Republicans who are 99% lies to not only others but themselves. In other words, as Freddie Roach, the boxing trainer who worked with, among others, Mike Tyson and Manny Pacquiao used to say, quote, "Let your hands go," unquote. He was encouraging boxers to be more active by throwing combinations instead of, I assume, playing defensive or being cagey and waiting for just the right moment to attempt a knockout punch. I hear commentators, if not necessarily exhorting, but extolling the virtues of talking to the other side. I have spent a lot of time around conservatives between growing up with them and working with them. I learned very quickly how futile an exercise it was speaking to them about America. Still, I would do it, but only as a job. You'd have to pay me a lot of money to do something as soul-sucking as talking to conservatives, Republicans, MAGA, whatever, and making it even more difficult, acting like you respect them. Show me the money. In a related matter, I'm not a big poll person, but I recently saw one that asked if you could, in my words, imagine a scenario where you would end a relationship with a family member over politics. 11% of Republicans and 44% of Democrats, that's 11% of Republicans and 44% of Democrats, responded that they could picture themselves doing that. But why the difference in percentage between parties? Again, that's 11% of Republicans and 44% of Democrats. If I were to venture a guess, it's a tacit acknowledgement by Republicans that Democrats are not as much of a threat to America and, by implication, democracy, as Republicans often claim Democrats are. In other words, if only unconsciously, they know better. On the other hand, Democrats such as myself are often horrified when a family member aligns themselves with a movement that subscribes to the view that the ends justify the means, no matter how cruel. But much as we might like to, it might be awkward as well as damaging to the family to end a relationship with a family member, even though we have come to profoundly disrespect them and actually consider them destructive to the country. Also, it's just more work and stress for the women who are usually stuck with responsibility for maintaining family dynamics and keeping family gatherings pleasant, as opposed to awkward and tense. For everyone, family relationships, as well as friendships, come in concentric circles. Assuming the person in question has not become MAGA infested to the point where they are not fit for polite company, simply reassign them to a more distant circle. In other words, keep them at arm's length and simply be cordial. Heck, Republicans, especially MAGA, are so deficient in emotional intelligence that they probably wouldn't even notice. But that is probably the relationship you already had with that person anyway, right? Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm Antifa. Oh, wait, what's Antifa again? I have never actually seen one. Let me do a search. Scrolling. Nope, no home office, no leader, no phone number. But I did find this definition. Straw man, a fake version of an opponent set up to be easy to knock down. Ending on a rare positive note, the quote of the day comes courtesy of Leah Greenberg, one of the founders of the grass movement Indivisible, behind the No Kings. She begins on a wonky note. open quote, we recognize that in a period of authoritarian breakthrough where there is a very rapid sprint to consolidate power, you cannot focus purely on the formal political avenues of representation, end quote. What then is an alternative to the, quote, formal political avenues of representation, unquote? Simply this, says Ms. Greenberg, quote, getting out of this, unquote, by which she means the fix we're in, quote, is going to require a symphony of defiance, unquote, a symphony of defiance. There might be some dissonance while warming up, but let the music begin.